My sister-in-law decided to hold her wedding at my house without asking for my permission and didn't want me to be involved, so I changed the locks and the wedding was canceled. So, let me tell you what happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, just a regular, peaceful day. I was sitting on the couch with Daniel, having a cup of tea and chatting about our upcoming trip. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt calm and perfect. But then, my phone rang, and it was my mother-in-law. Now, you know when you hear someone's voice and you just know something's not right? That's exactly how I felt when I picked up. She sounded off. "Laura, I need to talk to you about something," she said, and I immediately got that sinking feeling in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, already dreading what was coming. "It's Camilla," she started, and my heart dropped. "She's decided to have her wedding at your house this weekend." I swear I had to stop myself from laughing. I thought I heard her wrong. "What do you mean at our house?" I asked. My head was spinning. Camilla, my younger sister-in-law, had always been a bit much, but this, taking over our house without even asking? It didn't seem real. My mother-in-law kept going. She said it's the perfect spot and everything's already planned. I couldn't even process the words. It felt like I was in some bad dream. But wait. It gets worse. She added, and, she said she doesn't want you there. She doesn't want you overshadowing her big day. I just sat there, speechless. Really? Excluding me from my own house? I thought maybe I was hearing things. But no. Camilla, always so into herself and her image, didn't want me anywhere near her wedding. It wasn't just that she was taking over my house. She was making it clear she didn't want me around, as if I was some kind of problem. I was fuming, but at the same time, I felt hurt. How could she be so disrespectful? I'd always been kind to her, even though she could be a little too much. Sometimes, but this crossed the line. Daniel, who had been sitting quietly beside me, finally spoke up. "This is insane. She can't just do this." He was obviously upset too, and I could tell he wanted to do something about it. But I wasn't. Sure what? I sat there for a moment trying to get my thoughts together. I knew I couldn't just let it go. This wasn't the first time Camilla had pulled something like this, and I was done being the quiet one. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about respect. If she thought she could walk all over me, she had another thing coming. So I made a decision. I told Daniel, "I'm changing the locks." No way was I letting her take over my space. I wasn't going to let her disrespect me like that. And trust me, this was only the beginning. So, after I made up my mind that I wasn't going to let this slide, I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't just sit around and wait for someone else to fix it. It was my house, my space, and Camilla had completely crossed the line. The first thing I did was change the locks. I didn't know what else she might plan, but one thing was for sure. Nobody was getting into my house without my permission. I was starting to feel the anger rising, but I knew I needed to stay calm if I didn't want things to get even more complicated. I grabbed my phone and sent a direct message to my father-in-law and Camilla's fiancé, letting them know the wedding wasn't happening at my house. I wasn't wasting time with niceties. The message was clear. "Hey, just so you know, Camilla's wedding is not going to happen here. I changed the locks, and I won't allow anyone to use my house this way." My father-in-law didn't reply right away, which just made me more irritated. For a moment, I wondered if he was somehow okay with Camilla's idea, and that made me even angrier. Camilla's fiancé, on the other hand, texted back with one simple question. "Why?" As if I needed to explain something so obvious. "Because she excluded me. And besides, she didn't ask permission to use my house," I replied. And honestly, I was already done explaining myself. This was beyond ridiculous. I knew they'd probably try to convince me to change my mind, but I was already set on my decision. I wasn't about to let Camilla's wedding, or whatever she called it, ruin my peace. Just when I thought the situation might calm down, things took another turn. Camilla's fiancé and the wedding planner showed up at my house the next day, as if they were just heading to a party I had no idea was happening. They rang the doorbell, and when I opened the door, I saw the two of them standing there, looking surprised and a bit impatient. "Hey, Laura, we're here to go over the wedding details," Camilla's fiancé said, with a smile that didn't convince me one bit. I looked at him, not hiding my irritation. "Details? There's no wedding here, remember?" I said, trying to keep calm, but I couldn't help noticing how uncomfortable they looked. They started to argue, saying there wasn't enough time to find another venue and that everything was already planned. And here I was, standing at my door, not believing the nerve they had. "You have until the end of the day to leave my property," was all I could say. The tension in the air was thick. I could feel things getting tense, but I knew I had to stick to my guns. There was no way I was letting them take over my space. That's when, to my surprise, Camilla showed up, furious like a storm. She was so angry that she was practically beside herself. She started yelling at the door, saying I was ruining her dream, ruining her big day, and that no one respected her. I looked at her, not sure whether to laugh or get even angrier. "You have no right to do this. You're disrespecting me, Laura," she screamed, banging her fists on the door. I wanted to shout back, but I kept my cool, and the hardest part was not letting the anger take over. The neighbors, who were already getting curious about the noise, started gathering outside. And of course, as expected, the whole thing turned into a circus. That's when someone yelled from the window, "I'm calling the police!" And suddenly, what seemed like a family drama turned into something a lot more serious. Camilla kept screaming, ignoring the neighbors' warnings, and the tension just kept building. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I was ready for anything. I knew I had to stand my ground and not let her or anyone else disrespect me or my space. I just hoped the police wouldn't actually have to show up. After that whole mess, I thought things might calm down, but they didn't. If anything, everything just spiraled out of control. I felt like I couldn't breathe without someone coming at me with more drama. It was exhausting. That same night, after Camilla's tantrum, I was just sitting on the couch, trying to process what had happened. Daniel was there, and we were both in disbelief. I kept asking myself how things got so out of hand so quickly. It was supposed to be a simple wedding, but it turned into a nightmare for me. The next morning, things took another turn. My phone rang, and I didn't even have to look to know who it was. It was my mother-in-law. She always seemed to call when things were the worst, and this time was no different. "Laura, why are you making such a scene? This is tearing the family apart," she said, her voice shaking. Honestly, it was like she was more upset about the wedding not happening at my house than the fact that her daughter had disrespected me. I took a deep breath before responding, trying not to lose it. "I didn't make the scene, Mom. Camilla did. She's the one who showed up at my door screaming and calling me names. I'm just protecting my home." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her struggling to find the right words. "But it's her wedding, Laura. She's just trying to make it special." Special? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "It's not special to disrespect people, Mom. She didn't ask, didn't even bother to be kind. She thought she could take over my house and exclude me from my own space. I won't let that happen." I could tell my mother-in-law didn't agree with me, but she didn't know what to say. The truth was, I wasn't going to apologize for standing my ground. I wasn't going to pretend like this was something I could just overlook. I didn't want to be a doormat anymore. The next day, I heard from Daniel's dad, who called to check in. I was already expecting some kind of blame to be placed on me, and I wasn't disappointed. "Laura, what happened? Why did you have to go this far?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "This is embarrassing. You could have handled this better." "Handled it better?" I repeated, incredulous. How else could I have handled it? She was using my house without permission and insulting me. What exactly was I supposed to do? Let her walk all over me? There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him sighing, probably trying to figure out what to say. "You know, Camilla's been under a lot of pressure. She didn't mean to hurt you, but..." I cut him off. "It doesn't matter. If she can't treat me with respect, then I don't have to tolerate it. I'm not the one who caused this mess." I hung up shortly after that, feeling even more drained than before. It was like no one understood that this wasn't about a wedding. It was about respect. But the worst part was, everyone was blaming me for all the chaos. Later that afternoon, I went out to run some errands to get away from the house for a while. When I came back, I saw a car parked in front of our house. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, I saw her, Camilla. She was standing there, pacing back and forth in front of the door. She looked furious, and I knew right away that something was going to happen. I just didn't know how bad it would get. I walked up to her, and before I could even say anything, she started shouting. "You think you can just ruin everything, huh? This is my day, and you made it all about you." I was taken aback by how crazy she sounded. "What are you talking about? This isn't about me. It's about you crossing boundaries and not respecting anyone else," I said, trying to stay calm but failing. She stepped closer, getting in my face, and I could feel the anger radiating off her. "You always want to make everything about you. You've ruined everything for me." I couldn't take it anymore. "No, Camilla, you ruined everything. You treated me like I didn't matter, and now you want to blame me for it? I'm done." I turned to walk away, but she wasn't done yet. Before I could reach the door, she shouted after me, "You better watch out. If you think this is over, you're wrong. You'll regret this." I didn't even look back. I knew she was just trying to scare me, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done being afraid. And that's when I realized that this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about boundaries, about not letting anyone walk over me. I had no idea where this would go, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to back down. The morning of the wedding was here, and I was already dreading it. I had tried to block out the stress of it all and focus on my day, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Camilla was not someone who could let things go, especially not when she thought she'd been wronged. I was just finishing my coffee when the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat. It was way too early for visitors, especially after everything that had happened. I didn't even have to look through the peephole to know who it was. It was them, Camilla's fiancé and the wedding planner. I was already on edge, but I opened the door, trying to keep calm. "We're here to finalize everything for the wedding," the wedding planner said, as if everything was perfectly normal. I stared at him for a moment, trying to hold in my anger. "What wedding?" I said flatly, crossing my arms. "I already told you this isn't happening here." The wedding planner looked taken aback, glancing at Camilla's fiancé for backup. "Well, we need to talk. Camilla is really upset, and we need to sort things out." Before I could respond, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up outside. I turned to see Camilla's car parked in front of the house. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. There was no way I could handle this today. Camilla stepped out of the car, and when she saw me standing there, she didn't even hesitate. "You can't stop it, Laura," she said, her voice cold. "This is happening whether you like it or not." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I stood there for a moment, feeling a rush of frustration and anger. "Camilla, this is my house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but my patience was running thin. "And you can't just show up and take over. I've told you it's not happening here, and that's final." She didn't care. She started walking toward the door, her fiancé and the planner following closely behind her. It felt like they thought they could just ignore me, like I didn't even matter in the equation. I couldn't take it anymore. "No!" I shouted, stepping in front of the door. "You're not coming in. This wedding is not happening here. Leave." At this point, Camilla snapped. "You have to be joking," she sneered. "You're ruining everything. I'm getting married here whether you like it or not." I stood my ground, my heart racing. "It's not happening, Camilla. You didn't ask me, you didn't respect me, and I'm not backing down." Camilla's fiancé looked awkward, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "This is ridiculous," he said, looking back at Camilla. "We're already behind schedule. What are we supposed to do now?" "Figure it out," I said firmly. "But it's not happening here. You need to leave." Camilla started pacing, her frustration growing by the second. "You can't just do this, Laura. Do you have any idea what I've been through? This is my dream. Wedding? And you're ruining it for me." Your dream wedding? I said, raising an eyebrow. You didn't even have the decency to ask, and now you're acting like I'm the one who's done something wrong. You made a choice without considering me at all. And just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, the neighbors started coming out of their houses, drawn by the noise. The whole street was starting to get involved, and I felt my anxiety spike. People were watching, judging, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep my composure. One of the neighbors, a woman who lived 2 houses down, stepped outside and yelled, "We're calling the police if you don't get off Laura's property." That was the final straw. Camilla froze, staring at the crowd starting to form. The tension was so thick it felt like it could snap at any moment. Her fiancé, now looking more and more uncomfortable, finally spoke up. "Let's just go. It's not worth it." But Camilla wasn't done. She spun around and faced me one last time, her eyes filled with pure rage. "This isn't over, Laura. You'll regret this. I promise you." I stood there, feeling a sense of relief wash over me as they started to leave. But that wasn't the end of it. I knew Camilla wasn't going to just walk away quietly. She wasn't the type of person to let go of a grudge easily. But for the moment, at least, the chaos had stopped. I watched them drive away, knowing that the wedding was officially canceled, and there was no going back for them. But as much as I was relieved, I couldn't help but feel a weight on my chest. This wasn't just a wedding. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Camilla was not going to let this go, and I knew I was in for more trouble. As the day went on, the drama didn't end there. I couldn't relax, not when I knew things were only going to get worse. The chaos of the wedding day was barely over when I felt like the storm wasn't even close to being done. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing all afternoon, and it felt like I couldn't escape the mess that had just unfolded. The worst part? It wasn't just Camilla I had to deal with anymore. It was the entire family. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and none of them were on my side. By the time evening rolled around, I was drained. Daniel and I had tried to talk through everything, but I could tell he was just as overwhelmed as I was. "I don't know how this got so out of hand," he said, rubbing his temples. "This wasn't supposed to be a battle, but it feels like we're stuck in the middle of a war." I sighed, sinking into the couch. It's like they all think I'm the villain in this story. I'm just trying to stand up for myself, and now I'm the one being blamed for all of it. Daniel looked at me, his eyes full of concern. "You didn't do anything wrong. Don't let them make you feel like you did." I nodded. But inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going to happen. Camilla wasn't the type to back off, and if I knew anything, it was that she had a long memory when it came to grudges. That night, as we sat down for dinner, the doorbell rang again. I froze. "I can't deal with any more of this today," I muttered, under my breath. Daniel got up and went to answer it. A few seconds later, he came back, his face pale. "It's your mother-in-law," he said quietly. "She wants to talk," I groaned, rubbing my eyes. "Great. Just what I needed." I reluctantly got up and walked toward the door. I didn't want to deal with her, but I knew she'd keep pushing until we spoke. When I opened the door, she was standing there, her face flushed with anger. "Laura, what have you done?" she practically hissed, stepping into the house without waiting for me to invite her in. "Mom, I'm not in the mood for a lecture right now," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "I've had enough of all this drama." But she wasn't hearing it. "No, you don't get to walk away from this. You've embarrassed the entire family. Camilla is devastated, and this is all your fault." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're blaming me? After everything Camilla did?" "She's under a lot of stress, Laura. You should have been more understanding. You could have let her have her wedding. It was just one day." "One day?" I repeated, my voice rising. "It's not just one day when someone disrespects me and takes over my house without even asking. This wasn't about a wedding. This was about control." She stared at me for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to yell or cry. "You've ruined everything. The family is falling apart, and now you're the one who's responsible." I felt my frustration building. "No, Mom, I'm not responsible for this. I didn't ask for any of this." Camilla didn't respect me, and I'm not going to sit here and let her walk all over me just because she's upset. I have a right to say no. She didn't say anything for a long time. Her silence felt heavy, like she was trying to figure out how to make me feel guilty. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. I had already put up with too much, and I wasn't about to let her twist this into being my fault. Finally, she spoke, but her words weren't comforting. If you keep pushing this, Laura, you'll lose the family. We'll never be the same again. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, the weight of her words sinking in. But as much as I wanted to give in, I knew I couldn't. I couldn't apologize for setting boundaries. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and messages, all of them filled with blame and accusations. Camilla sent me a text, telling me I'd ruined her life and that she'd never forgive me. Her words were harsh, but they didn't cut as deeply as they used to. I had come to realize that the way she treated me wasn't about me at all. It was about her need for control, and I wasn't going to let her have that anymore. But then, things escalated further. One morning, I got a call from the police. Apparently, Camilla had gone to our house again, trying to get in. The neighbors had seen her lurking around, and someone had called the cops. When I found out, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't know whether to be angry or scared. It was getting out of hand, and I knew something had to change. I rushed over to the police station, where they told me Camilla had been caught on camera trying to force her way into the house. She hadn't damaged anything, but her behavior was erratic. The officer who spoke to me warned me to take legal action if I wanted it to stop. When I got home, I felt a sense of dread. This wasn't the kind of family drama I ever imagined myself in. And yet, here I was, stuck in the middle of it, wondering how things had gotten so out of control. But I wasn't going to let it break me. Not this time. I had to take a stand. Not just for myself, but for the future of my own peace of mind.